Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the latest episode of Global Economic Perspectives with Raymond. I am your host, Raymond Chen. This week, global financial markets are witnessing what may become the most significant IPO in modern capital market history. Elon Musk's SpaceX has officially priced its initial public offering at US $135 per share, raising an astonishing US $75 billion and valuing the company at approximately US $1.77 trillion. To put this into perspective, the IPO is more than double the size of the previous record holder, Saudi Aramco's US $29.4 billion listing in 2019. But beyond the record-breaking fundraising numbers lies a much bigger story. This is not just another IPO. It represents the convergence of three powerful forces shaping the 21st century: technological supremacy, geopolitical competition, and the unprecedented influence of retail investors. Today, let's examine why SpaceX listing may become a defining moment for global capital markets. According to reports from Bloomberg, retail investor subscriptions have already exceeded US $100 billion globally, while institutional demand has been equally overwhelming. Nearly 1,000 institutional investors reportedly submit orders. Sovereign wealth funds from the Middle East, including Saudi Arabia's Public Investment Fund, Kuwait Investment Authority, and potentially Qatar Investment Authority, have all participated aggressively. The enthusiasm is remarkable. Even if retail investors are allocated 20% of the offering, at a relatively generous proportion by IPO standards, the vast majority of demand will remain unsatisfied. And this creates an important dynamic. When a highly anticipated IPO is heavily oversubscribed, the real buying pressure often begins after the stock starts trading. Many investors who fail to receive sufficient allocations will rush into the secondary market, potentially driving price significantly higher. This phenomenon has occurred before with companies such as Tesla, Nvidia, and even during the technology boom of the late 1990s. The difference is that SpaceX is operating on an entirely different scale. To understand the enthusiasm, we must first understand what SpaceX has become. Most people still think of SpaceX as a rocket company. The perception is now outdated. SpaceX today is essentially three strategic businesses combined into a single corporate structure. First, there is the launch business, which has already achieved dominance in global commercial space transportation. Second, there is Starlink, the world's largest satellite internet network. And third, perhaps the most important, there is the emerging AI and defense infrastructure component that increasingly positions SpaceX as a critical strategic asset for governments. And this combination is unique. Investors are not buying a rocket manufacturer. They are buying exposure to the future infrastructure of the digital economy. If the 20th century was built upon railways, highways, ports, and power grids, the 21st century may increasingly rely upon satellite communications, space logistics, autonomous systems, and artificial intelligence networks. SpaceX sits at the center of all these developments. And that explains why investors are willing to value the company at nearly US $1.8 trillion. Among SpaceX business, Starlink may be the most misunderstood. Many investors continue to focus on rocket launch because they are visually impressive. However, from a financial perspective, Starlink could become the company's most valuable asset. The satellite broadband business is creating a global telecommunications network independent of traditional terrestrial infrastructure. Unlike conventional telecom operators that require extensive fiber optic networks and cellular towers, Starlink's constellation provides coverage almost everywhere on Earth. The strategic implications are enormous. Governments with communications infrastructure as a matter of national security. Military organizations increasingly rely on satellite-based connectivity. Remote regions gain internet access without requiring costly physical infrastructure. Developing countries can leapfrog traditional telecom development models. In other words, Starlink is not merely competing with telecom companies. It is creating an entirely new category of global infrastructure. Some analysts have compared its long-term significance to the emergence of the Internet itself. If that assessment proves even partially correct, current valuations may not appear excessive in hindsight. Another important factor driving demand is Elon Musk himself. Few corporate leaders in history have cultivated such a powerful following among retail investors. During Tesla's rise, millions of investors effectively became brand ambassadors, defending the company, promoting its products, and continuously buying its shares. Analysts estimate that retail investors now own roughly 40% of Tesla, and this is unprecedented for a company of such scale. SpaceX is benefiting from the same phenomenon. Many investors are not merely evaluating financial metrics. They are investing in Elon Musk's vision of the future. And this introduces an emotional component rarely seen in capital markets. Traditional valuation models focus on cash flow, earnings growth, and balance sheets. Musk companies often trade on something different: belief. Investors are buying a narrative that includes colonizing Mars, transforming transportation, revolutionizing communications, advancing artificial intelligence, and reshaping humanity's technological future. Whether one agrees with that vision or not, its influence on investor behavior is undeniable. The SpaceX story cannot be separated from geopolitics. For decades, governments were the primary actors in space exploration. Today, private companies are becoming strategic national assets. SpaceX's relationship with the United States government is particularly significant. The company works closely with NASA, the Department of Defense, and numerous intelligence agencies. Its launch capabilities are now essential to America's space strategy. Its satellite network has demonstrated military applications in multiple geopolitical conflicts. Its technological leadership supports broader American efforts to maintain dominance in critical technologies. From this perspective, SpaceX resembles something larger than a traditional corporation. It increasingly functions as a strategic pillar of American national power. And this reality explains why sovereign wealth funds worldwide are eager to participate. Investing in SpaceX is not just a financial decision. It is also an investment in the future direction of global technological leadership. Whenever a company reaches trillion-dollar territory, valuation concerns inevitably emerge. At US 1.77 trillion, SpaceX joins the ranks of the world's largest corporation despite remaining relatively early in its commercial development compared with established giants. Critics argue that investors may be pricing in decades of future growth, but supporters counter that disruptive technologies are frequently underestimated. History offers examples supporting both sides. During the dot-com bubble, many technology companies were dramatically overvalued and eventually collapsed. Yet, investors who bought Amazon, despite similar criticism, and ultimately achieved extraordinary returns. Likewise, Tesla has repeatedly described as overvalued throughout the last decade. The stock subsequently increased many times over. The challenge lies in distinguishing between speculative excess and transformational innovation. SpaceX may represent elements of both. Short-term volatility appears inevitable, and long-term potential remains substantial. The broader implications extend far beyond SpaceX itself. The success of this IPO signals a renewed appetite for growth assets after years of uncertainty driven by inflation, interest rate hikes, and geopolitical tensions. It also demonstrates that investors remain willing to pay premium valuations for companies perceived as leaders in transformative technologies. This could trigger a new wave of technology listing globally. Artificial intelligence firms, defense technology companies, advanced manufacturing enterprise, and space-related business may all benefit from the benchmark established by SpaceX. For stock exchanges around the world, the message is clear. The next generation of market leaders will increasingly emerge from sectors that combine technology, national security, and strategic infrastructure. The traditional boundaries between these industries were disappearing. So what lessons should investors draw from this historic event? First, technological leadership remains the most valuable asset in modern economy. Companies that control critical technologies increasingly command premium valuations. Second, geopolitics is becoming inseparable from investment analysis. Investors must understand not only financial statements, but also strategic national priorities. Third, retail investors are now a major force in capital markets. The collective influence can significantly affect pricing dynamics, especially in high-profile offerings. Finally, visionary leadership continues to matter. Markets ultimately invest in people as much as they invest in business. Elon Musk's ability to attract capital reflects not only SpaceX achievements, but also his unique capacity to inspire belief in long-term possibilities. As we conclude today's discussion, it is worth remembering that the significance of SpaceX IPO extends beyond the US $75 billion raised. This event symbolized a broader transition in the global economy. We are moving from an era dominated by traditional industrial giants into one increasingly defined by technology platforms, artificial intelligence, space infrastructure, and strategic innovation. SpaceX stands at the intersection of all these trends. Whether the stock rises sharply on its first trading day or experience periods of volatility afterward may ultimately prove less important than the larger transformation it represents. The real question is not whether SpaceX is worth US 1.8 trillion today. The real question is whether the technologies it is building will define the global economy of the next 30 years. If the answer is yes, then this IPO may one day be remembered not simply as the largest public offering in history, but as the moment capital markets officially recognized the arrival of the space economy. And in investing, as in history, those who recognize a new era early often become its greatest beneficiaries. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Global Economic Perspective with Raymond. If you have invested in SpaceX, please share your thoughts and comments below. I'm Raymond Chen, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye-bye.